Welcome in, everybody. Great to be with you as always, as it is time for the college football wrap. Man, what a weekend. This is why we love college football. And of course we do. It gets better with each passing week. I would take the time to say, first of all, hey, try to appreciate every weekend, right? It goes too quick for all of us. I know that it does, but we have more football, and glorious football it was. My name is Jeff Cameron. Thanks for joining the College Football Wrap. We do it every Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Joining me on the program today will be Palmer Toms from Dogs HQ. Heck of a game there in Athens. Tyler Horka, Blue and Gold Illustrated, and Matthew Brune, the Bengal Tiger. Also an incredible game. What's really literally across the country yesterday, we had what we love so much in the world of college football. So let's get straight to it. As always, we begin the show by recapping what happened within the top 25 with some notes, stats, and the like, and then we bring on our guests. So the top 25 begins with obviously what happened between Tennessee and Georgia as they shut down Tennessee's high-powered offense, dominated the Volunteers in every facet of the game, 27-13 Saturday in this SEC showdown. Georgia now 9-0, 6-0 in the Southeastern Conference. Obviously now odds-on favorites to win the East, and really in a game that you could look at a lot of ways, you have to start with Georgia's defense. Dominant. We'll talk to Palmer Toms, as I mentioned before, but holding Tennessee to without a touchdown for the first, say, 56 minutes of the football game or thereabouts, that'll help. That'll help you win big games, and it did for Georgia. We'll get more into that game, as I said, in a moment. Ohio State and Northwestern played in a monsoon. Winds in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 miles per hour. Nobody could throw the football game. C.J. Stroud, in fact, the Big Ten leader in passing yards, set a career low with 76. They didn't need it. They pounced on Northwestern and won the game 21-7. Really second half dominance there in an ugly day for football. Michigan 52-17 over Rutgers. It's the first time all season long that Michigan has trailed at halftime. They come back from that halftime deficit and dominate in Piscataway, New Jersey, 52-17. LSU and Alabama, we mentioned it a moment ago. What a game, 32-31. Jaden Daniels ran for a 25-yard touchdown in overtime, found Mason Taylor for a do-or-die two-point conversion. It happens. Brian Kelly gets a signature victory right off the bat in year one. What a difference between week one and where we sit now with this LSU team who is kind of controlling their destiny in the West. And we've got TCU over Texas Tech, by the way, 34-24 in that game. The Horned Frogs are 9-0. 6-0 in the Big 12. It is a 9-game winning streak, the longest for TCU since they won 16 straight and 14 and 15. Number 8, Oregon, 49, Colorado 10. Colorado's a bad football team. Oregon reminded them of that by winning. Going away, Bo Nix completed 20 of 24 passes for 274 yards, 2 touchdowns, caught a touchdown pass as well. Some interesting stats there for Oregon, as you see. We mentioned this before. They're the first FBS team to have a receiving touchdown from an offensive lineman, a receiving score from a quarterback, and a rushing TD by a linebacker, a defensive player, in the same game since 1996. Pretty interesting there. Number 14, Utah 45, Arizona 20. Ugly game for Arizona. Couldn't stop the run. We can't stop the run. You can't win football games. A season high 306 rushing yards for Utah. Texas 34, K-State 27. Ugly second half for Texas, but they hold on, and they were led by Bijan Robinson, who had 209 yards rushing and a touchdown. That's what that guy does. Michigan State upsets Illinois 23-15. Would note here that it is a fourth down nightmare for Illinois on the day. The Illini stopped 5 times on fourth down. 3 of those were in the red zone. Penn State rolled easily 45-14 over Indiana. A lot to talk about here. Katron Allen, 86 yards, scored a season high 3 times. Kansas gets back in the win column. They get healthy. And how about this? They run for 224 yards, does Devin Neal. And he had 110 receiving yards. Kansas 37, Oklahoma State 16. Not a good day at the office for the Oklahoma State defense. They gave up a ton of rushing yards. Tulane beats Tulsa 27-13. And at this point, you would note that the Green Wave are 8-1, 5-0 in the American at this point. Washington beat Oregon State 24-21. Elsewhere, games of note, Central Florida on the outskirts there, right there at 25. They beat Memphis 35-28. Cincinnati knocks off Navy 23-15. And in a rivalry game, Florida State trounces the University of Miami in a game that was never competitive, 45-3. Most lopsided victory in the history of that series for the road team. So without further ado, we'll take the time now and get into it because, as I say, I always like to have the opportunity to talk to guys on the ground. These are the guys that run the sites 4-on-3 in their respective programs, and they have the expertise and insight to get you caught up on who's doing what. Well, right off the bat, we start with Palmer Toms, Dogs HQ. Hey, Palmer, how are you? Good morning this morning, sir.
I'm doing well, Jeff. That extra hour of sleep certainly came in handy after what was an exciting game in Athens, and one that'll be remembered for a long time here in the Classic City.
Atmosphere looked absolutely incredible, and I will say, for the purposes of transparency, my niece goes to the University of Georgia. She was there and was awfully excited, and I told her I was happy she had a good day. It looked like all dogs did. Let's start with why they did. The defense reminding everybody that, yeah, Tennessee's offense is nice, and offense in general is what fans like to talk about, but I thought Georgia's defense just carried the day and dominated the line of scrimmage.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, offense is what everyone likes to talk about, and that was certainly the case coming into this game. But if Georgia's defense took note of that, they took it personally. You heard after the game, Kirby Smart told us that cornerback Keely Ringo texted him last Sunday when they were starting prep for Tennessee and said, "Hey, coach, can I meet with you?" He was like, "Hey, man, what's up?" He said, "I want number 11. I want Jalen Hyatt." And to me, that was kind of the attitude that Georgia as a team took into this game. They embraced the challenge of this Tennessee offense, especially that defense. To me, I think when you go up against an offense like this, there's two ways you can play it. You can either put the extra reinforcements in the secondary and trust your defensive front to get pressure naturally, or you can bring pressure up front and trust your defensive backs back there to hold their own. Either way, you're relying on the talent that you have somewhere and supporting an extra little bit of your defense elsewhere. And Georgia decided we're going to trust our defensive backs. Very, very bold strategy against a Tennessee offense that was leading the country. Number one in scoring, number one in yards, yada, yada, yada. You can go down the line with these stats. But Georgia knew that they needed to get pressure on Hendon Hooker. They couldn't let him sit back there and pick them apart, because if you're not getting pressure, you're asking those defensive backs to cover for a longer time than they're capable of. So Georgia certainly got pressure on the day, came into the day last in the SEC in sacks, 120th in the country with 10 on the season. They had 6 yesterday. And really, I think I'll be interested to see if there's any stat changes. Could have been 8 because there were 2 plays that weren't credited as sacks. One was originally credited as 1 and then changed in the press box to just a run for no gain from Hendon Hooker. I'll be interested to see if it bumps up to 8, but certainly 6. I mean, more than half your season total coming into the game. That's one way to slow down this Tennessee offense.
Yeah, Palmer, I thought from the get-go, Starks, Ringo, you mentioned, obviously Bullard, I think had 2 sacks in this game as well. I watched this game. It was Georgia harassing Hendon Hooker all afternoon long. Really, he could never get comfortable. You could tell that. But it wasn't just Georgia's ability to dominate the passing game of Tennessee that we talk so much about. They held Tennessee as well to under 100 yards rushing. And I think that is a misnomer. I think you wrote about it as well there on the site, Dogs HQ. Because a lot of people think that all Tennessee does is throw it around the lot. Well, they mix in the run nicely. That's one of the complementary elements of this offense, is that if you want to play off, they'll run the football, but they couldn't run the football either. So you dominated on both ends. And it's funny, you put the faith in your secondary. That proves out to be a wise decision. But what you also learn is something you probably already knew. You got a pretty good defensive line.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Jalen Carter at full strength is a wrecking ball up front for Georgia. 88 there in the middle. Felt like he was going to make a big impact. Felt like it was important for him to make a big impact, especially with him getting after the quarterback. Well, he forces 2 fumbles on the day. One of those was on Hendon Hooker in the end zone. I thought it was a safety.
It was a safety. They screwed that call up, Palmer. You're correct.
Yeah, I thought it was a safety. Went back and watched it, thought it was a safety again. Certainly interested to see if there's any statement on that. But, Georgia, Jalen Carter, Warren Brinson, Nazir Stackhouse, those guys were absolute monsters up front for the Bulldogs. They needed them to be, and it was certainly important for them because, again, they understood that, like you said, little bit of a misnomer there that Tennessee was this pass happy team. I think they came into the game running it like 58% of the time. And so, that was, that was something that they really wanted to put an emphasis on stopping. You make them one dimensional. It's something that they did last year, very similar strategy, get after Hendon Hooker there and worked out again this Saturday.
Before I get into salting the game away with a 15-play drive that took the life out of Tennessee in that second half, and the weather rolled in and all that good stuff, and then it was a lot of fun for the students, I could tell, as the rains came down. But I wonder. I'm curious. Obviously, you cover Georgia 4 on 3, and people who aren't in Athens there, like you are, covering this team on a day-to-day basis. It's been an interesting year for Georgia, who's had at times looked bored. At times, Georgia almost has looked like a team that just plays down to their competition, really never worried about losing a football game. But I've pointed out to people, it's hard to have every single member of the football team drafted in the first round of the NFL draft a year ago and not see a drop-off. Tell me, how much percentage-wise is it that sometimes they play down to their competition because they're a little bored and they know they're an elite team that can turn it on at any time? And how much of it has been the transition of losing so many key and central figures to that defense a year ago?
I think it has been a little bit of both. And in all honesty, when you look at the games that Georgia has been in closer ones, it hasn't been because of the defense. It's been more so because of turnovers. They've lost the turnover battle in 3 games this year against Kent State. Well, that was one of their closer games. Against Missouri, that was their closest one and probably the closest that they've come all season to a loss. And then against Florida this past a week ago, yesterday, that one was close there for a second. It was down to a 1-possession game. It really hasn't been because of the defense that they've, been in tight games, when they have been in tight games, and you want to call a game against Florida a 22-point win a tight game, go ahead. Missouri, to me, is really the only tight game where it ever really felt like Georgia was in trouble. In all honesty, I think you look at the games that they have played really well, the Oregons, the South Carolinas, the Tennessees. They have dominated on the defensive side of the football there. And it's just the standard in Athens. It's something that Kirby Smart and these players preach. And then they know that, just because they had 8 players picked on the defensive side of the football doesn't mean that there's going to be a drop off. They've recruited these guys. Kirby said it this week. These guys that are here, these guys that are on the field now, they are there because of their own merit, not because, the conversation should be about them and what they're doing, not what they lost, because it's very, very impressive to be doing what they're doing and having lost what they lost.
And the further removed we get from that dominating performance against Oregon to start the season, the more impressive it looks, as Oregon has gone on to really light it up and dominate in the Pac-12. So we think back about that game and the way Georgia dominated that football game. Let's go back to this game here. It was a huge one, and obviously Georgia kind of took the life out of Tennessee pretty quickly in this one. I go back to the second half, though. If there's ever going to be a comeback for a team that's trailing and has an explosive offense, it's usually going to start there. They've got to come down and score. The team that's winning big has got to kind of fool around, have a 3 and out. And really, when you look at this game, Tennessee does have a decently long drive, but they only get 3 points out of it. And when Georgia gets the ball, I think it was 15 plays. And it's good night, Irene, because at that point, we're talking about, 8-9 minutes off the clock, and you can call it a day.
Well, and if you're talking about the third quarter drive, Tennessee actually went, I think, and I pulled it up here. They went 11 plays and took 5:07 off the clock and got nothing out of it to open the third quarter. So that was big because you look up at the clock and, you're already under 10 minutes by the time that Georgia gets the ball. Well, then they go on that 15-play, 8:44 drive and get 3 points out of it. You would have liked to get a touchdown if you're Georgia, but getting 3 points, making it a 21-point game at that point, and with very little time in the third quarter. Like you said, the weather had started to roll in. The fans were really enjoying it, which I think is, something that made yesterday so special for everybody. Kirby said it, when it started raining, there weren't any empty seats except for the ones that Tennessee fans had bought. It was a little bit of a strategy there of, hey, we're gonna run the ball, we're gonna chew the clock, we're going to keep this game on the ground, keep it going, get out of here, and keep advancing down the field because, like we said, they were winning that line of scrimmage battle. They were able to throw it around in the first half. Stetson Bennett had a really strong day there. 226 yards before the break, accounted for all 3 of Georgia's touchdowns. And you felt like he really had to play well, especially going up against that Tennessee offense. So credit, to Stetson Bennett. Don't want to forget about him. But like you said, that third quarter and the ability to run the ball there in the second half was really big for Georgia.
Well, and Palmer, I was going to ask you this before we left because that's how I was going to end. Stetson Bennett, at times maligned, has been uneven with his play, but I thought early in this game showed he was locked in. The touchdown run in and of itself is a hell of a Kickstarter because of the toughness that he showed on that run. There's an elusiveness there. There's a what for to the end of that run, obviously, hitting the pylon, taking a shot to the head, by the way, which they didn't call. All of that on display. I thought it was very, very impressive. A good afternoon for Stetson Bennett, who I think needed one because at times he was a little uneven against Florida.
Well, and it was a great response to the turnover that they had in the first drive as well, because you look at this game and you felt like, that nobody expected Georgia's defense to play as well as they did. Nobody expected Tennessee's offense, the number 1 offense in the country, to be held without a touchdown for almost 56 minutes of that game. It came out to 55 minutes and 45 seconds there. So, if you're looking at this game, you're expecting it to go, back and forth. Well, you got to keep serve. And if you're Georgia and you turn the ball over there on that first drive, holding Tennessee to 3 points on the first drive was huge for the defense, but the response from the offense to say, okay, hey, we're in this game. We're not going to turn the ball over, which has been a problem for Georgia in those games that they've made close. We're going to, stop messing around, and we're going to go downfield. The strike to Arian Smith, 50-plus yard strike there, something that Georgia fans have been waiting for out of that kid. He's been so banged up throughout his career, but he's always had that game-changing speed, that game-changing playmaking ability there that Georgia fans have been waiting to see in a game like this. Well, they saw it in when Georgia got things going offensively in that second drive. That leads to that touchdown run. Like you said, Stetson shows a little bit of toughness and elusiveness to escape the pocket, escape pressure, avoid a sack. He took this one personally. You saw him with a little bit of a phone celebration. Call me. He told us after the game that, and it was reported during the game that his phone number got leaked on social media. And Tennessee fans, he said he woke up, throughout the night, had 600, 700 phone calls from Tennessee fans. So, he certainly wanted to play well. This is a school that means so much to him. Playing in an atmosphere like that, the fans mean so much to him. Obviously, his legacy is cemented in Athens already with that national championship, but a win like yesterday's just goes the extra yard to further his legacy here.
Final thing, Palmer, what's left for you guys this week as folks tune in and go to the site Dogs HQ?
Yeah, we're going to have a ton of coverage throughout the day today. Reactions, recap of the game, big win over Tennessee. We'll have our podcast live on YouTube, 8:30 Eastern, before we turn the page to Mississippi State and a tough test that the Bulldogs have going on the road to take on the Bulldogs in Starkville and the Cowbells. And, Georgia has set themselves up for a fun closing stretch here. Road trip to Starkville, road trip to Lexington, and of course, the rivalry game against Georgia Tech to end the season before likely playing LSU in the SEC championship. I know that's something you're going to get into here before too long, so I won't steal your glory. But Dogs HQ, and follow us for your coverage today and throughout the rest of the season.
Have a great rest of your Sunday, Palmer. Thanks for joining us this morning. We appreciate your time. Be well, good sir, and I'll talk to you down the line.
Of course. Thanks, Jeff.
Yep, take care. Palmer Thomas right there, Dogs HQ. Now we go from one big win to another, and I'm excited to welcome in Tyler Horka, Blue and Gold, another great On3 site. Tyler and I just got done talking. And Tyler, what was it we talked about? We talked about finding an identity, understanding that the run game was where it was at. And the numbers are overwhelmingly so that Notre Dame, if they're going to win, they got to run the damn ball. They're 6-0 this season when they run it 40 times or more. They're 0-3 when they don't. Is it that simple?
Yeah, it is. And you saw it last night. Now, they do need a little bit of help along the way, helping themselves, I would say. Against Syracuse last week, what did we talk about? That pick six at the very beginning of the game kind of set the tone. And then when
Yeah.
things got dicey late, they still had that touchdown cushion. Last night, what was it? They block another punt. I think it's the fifth time in the last 4 games and the sixth time this season that Notre Dame has blocked a punt. And they just said, we're not even going to set up our offense for this one. We're just going to take this one right in. So they spot themselves 7 points again. When you get out ahead in ball games, especially against good teams like Clemson, you're able to stick to your identity a little bit more. You're able to say, okay, yeah, this is going to be one of those games where we run 40 times because we're playing from ahead. Notre Dame does not like to play from behind. You saw it against Marshall of all teams. You saw it against Stanford of all teams when they dropped down 13-0 in that ball game. So when Notre Dame gets out ahead, they're able to give the ball to Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, take the pressure off of Drew Pine, who struggled again, barely completed 50% of his passes against Clemson. But look, you can have Drew Pine throw for 85 yards in a ball game when you run 47 times for 263 yards and a couple touchdowns. That's going to get the job done against just about anybody. And when you hold Clemson down like Notre Dame did defensively as well, it's another one of those games, just like we talked about last week, where Notre Dame played really well in all 3 phases of the game.
Tyler, I'm kind of having fun watching this Notre Dame team. I enjoy old school teams that will bludgeon you in the run game, win special teams, play good enough defense. I think you're right, though. They're going to need a little bit more if they seek to go 9-3 and get an upset at the end of the year. I guess it would be a pseudo upset over Southern Cal. I think the way Notre Dame's playing right now, I don't know that people would be shocked by that.
Yeah.
But you're going to have to get Drew Pine to do more than the 52 or 53% completion and 85 yards, whatever it was. I am kind of curious. Do you think there's more in there with him, or is he what he is at this point?
I think there has to be a little something. Look, North Carolina is an 8-1 football team, and what's that one? Notre Dame beat them very handily in Chapel Hill at the end of September. And why did Notre Dame win that game? Yeah, the running game was good. I think they ran for something like 287 yards, but Drew Pine passed for 289 yards in that game. So that was as balanced as it gets. Tommy Rees, offensive coordinator, talks about balance, balance, balance. What you're looking at right there is not balance. That's a one-dimensional football team. And when you play as well defensively and in special teams as Notre Dame did, you can win games like that. But what Notre Dame did against North Carolina with Drew Pine passing the ball, completing about 75% of his passes, 3 touchdowns, looked really good in spreading it around in that game. It wasn't just Michael Mayer, the tight end against North Carolina. He got the ball to Lorenzo Styles for a deep touchdown. Braden Lenzy was catching the ball. Jaden Thomas, you had other guys involved. So it's there. Notre Dame can do it. I think Notre Dame could probably do it against a defense like USC's. That's a little Jekyll and Hyde. As Jekyll and Hyde as the Notre Dame offense has been this year, USC is kind of that team as well. So it's possible. But the one thing about that USC game at the end of the year, and I know we're skipping ahead of Navy and Boston College, but with the way Notre Dame's playing right now, you think they're going to win that game. I know it's been a weird season, but you think that they can beat those opponents. So you do look ahead to USC. You can't let Caleb Williams and all those offensive talents that they have there get out ahead of you, because what we talked about at the beginning of this conversation is very real. When Notre Dame plays from ahead, it can do this where it gives the ball to Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, and let those guys go downhill. Look at those numbers. You take those every single time, but all of a sudden when you're losing 10-0 and you're like, okay, Drew Pine, you're going to have to throw it a little bit, things get a little dicey for Notre Dame.
Yeah, 47 team rushes for 263 yards and 2 touchdowns will carry the day most days. But like you said, there is a very exact recipe for Notre Dame to win football games, and it's to get out ahead so that you can fall back on that run game, throw off a play action. I was very impressed, and I've been very impressed. You know, you and I talked last week about the hiccup, the one inexplicable, the Stanford game that everybody keeps going back to, or else this would be a tremendous season. Right now it's a good season, verging on very good season. It would already be there had they not dropped that game to Stanford. And I don't want to belabor that point. What I do want to do is go back to Marcus Freeman, who kind of figured out, hey, this is going to be our identity. I can't shy away from that. And he was quoted in your article today, Blue and Gold, and anybody else that wants to read this, certainly you see it on the screen right there. Go sign up right now. It's just $10 through the rest of the year. But quote, I read Marcus Freeman's quote to you here. I know you know what it is. We knew this defensive line, meaning Clemson's, was special, but we could not shy away from our strength. it's so refreshing for coaches to find out what they are, what the team's strength is, and never play to the other teams. Just play to your own strengths. They never shied away. Right now, Clemson's been exposed. This isn't a Clemson show, but this is the third team that has just lined up and run on Clemson this year. Notre Dame with the capper. I know Florida State did it in a loss. It's interesting to watch now. Good choice, Marcus Freeman. Good to see a guy recognize what a team is and stick to the guns.
And do it in his first year as a head coach, right? There's a lot of 36-year-old head. Well, here's the thing. There's not a lot of 36-year-old head coaches out there, period. But anybody that would have been in Marcus Freeman's shoes, maybe they say, oh, man, we can't go at this Clemson front. Those are some big, bad dudes up there, and they're going to stop us in our tracks, and we're going to have to find another way to win the game. No, he said, we're going to do what we do, because there have been just learning curves left and right for Marcus Freeman this year, right? You mentioned the stat at the beginning, 6-0 when you run 40 or more times, 0-3 when you don't. I think Marcus Freeman was smart enough to realize going into this thing, man, if we don't hit that number, and it's not an exact science, right? Notre Dame could have run the ball 39 times as well as it did last night and probably still won the game. But there's a correlation there. Notre Dame knows what it is. Marcus Freeman knows that this is what Notre Dame is. And he said, I guarantee you, he huddled Tommy Rees and all the other coaches in some room in South Bend here and said, hey, if we're going to win this game, we're going to win it with number 7 and number 3 running the ball. And that's exactly what happened. I just have to go back to the special teams, though. I think Brian Mason might be more popular than Marcus Freeman in South Bend right now. He's the special teams coach. Yeah, I tweeted something about him on the field. Obviously, there was a field storming in South Bend last night, and he was just kind of standing there soaking it all in, and I took a picture of him. That is my most liked tweet on Twitter right now is Brian Mason, because these are game-changing plays that Notre Dame has had in special teams, and Dabo Swinney said it was mind-boggling that they just let Jordan Botelho go right up the middle and block that punt. Isaiah Foskey has done the same thing a couple times this year. It's kind of like with the run game, right? These guys know that Notre Dame is coming after punts. It's an aggressive special teams unit, something that we haven't seen in South Bend in recent years. Brian Mason is the reason for that. These teams know it's coming, and they still can't stop it. That's a refreshing thought if you're a Notre Dame fan, that these things are just working in Notre Dame's favor. And it's no fluke either. Notre Dame is trying to do these things, and they're being successful in doing them.
Yeah, it's a fun brand of football. Tyler, lay bare for us what you got this week. What's going on there at Blue and Gold? Let everybody know so that they can get the best in Notre Dame coverage here for On 3.
So Notre Dame is going on the road, I guess you would call it, a neutral site game in Baltimore where the Ravens play against Navy. Everyone that follows Notre Dame football knows that this was once the longest standing rivalry, if you would call it that, in college football. They had played every year dating back to 1927. COVID kind of squashed that because Notre Dame joined the ACC for a year and wasn't able to play Navy. But I would say this is Navy is what it is. They're not a great football program right now, but there are some historical ties to this rivalry. We'll be writing about it all week at blueandgold.com. Obviously, today we're focusing on Clemson and what happened last night, Notre Dame beating the number 4 team in the country. But I think you said it a little earlier. This is an exciting time to follow Notre Dame football, read about Notre Dame football. There was a moment where you thought this season with the first-year head coach was on the fritz, and you didn't know if Notre Dame was going to get to 6 wins and make a bowl game. Now it's very possible they finish the year 9-3 if they upset USC. You can win 10 games with a bowl game victory. We have all of that covered at blueandgold.com. $10 for an entire year of premium access. If you're a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, that's the place to be.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Tyler. Be well. I've enjoyed your coverage, and thank you for taking the time to come on here with us again this morning. I'm sure I'll talk to you down the line as Notre Dame continues to play well. Be good, sir.
All right. I appreciate you, Jeff.
Yep, take care. That is Tyler Horica. You saw there Blue and Gold Illustrated. We'll, in a moment, have an opportunity, we do believe, to talk to Matthew Brune of the Bengal Tiger. Obviously, they're coming fresh off a absolutely huge win and really one of the most exciting games of football you'll see this year. In fact, there he is in the green room. I know that now. It's perfect time to segue in. We've talked to Matthew before. We're going to talk to him right now. Hello, Matthew. Good morning to you. What a game, to say the least. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Recovering a little bit. I just long night in the press box. We did our podcast right afterwards. Obviously we weren't going anywhere. Traffic was crazy. So just glad to be home and after a long night and get some rest and now talk about this game.
Yeah, so for people that didn't see the way that Matthew did for the Bengal Tiger this football game and only saw the score, well, they'd look at the score 32-31. They'd say, that was a good game. It was a crazy game. It's a crazy game. 7-6 at halftime, everybody. 7-6. There are 6 lead changes in the second half. Let's go through all of it. I guess I want to start, Matthew, with the defense, because I know people see 32-31. They may not want to start with the defense, but I watched this game. I saw the way that LSU played, and I thought they were really good at getting an awful lot of pressure throughout the game on Bryce Young, and I thought he looked a little off or certainly uncomfortable.
Yeah, I mean, he completed only 49% of his passes, and that's Bryce Young, that reigning Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, they dialed up more blitzes in that game than they had all season, to me, in any game all season. And so you give credit to defensive coordinator Matt House in the way that he was able to really attack Bryce Young. They had star freshman linebacker Harold Perkins on the field a ton. So when you have him and then you have, potential first round defensive end in BJ Ojolari, that allows you to be more aggressive. And then I thought from the back end, they hung with the Alabama receivers really well, whether it's Ja'Cory Brooks, Latu had a couple receptions, but for the most part, I thought the defensive backs did a great job in sticking in coverage and forcing Bryce Young to extend plays. And try to extend plays while Harold Perkins, kind of spied him for a bit. But yeah, the defense was tremendous. I mean, like you said, it ends up being 31-32. Sorry for those who had the under 56.5, but man, what a performance from the defense.
So let's work backwards and talk. We started with the defense there, but I guess obviously I want to get your thoughts. Was there a sense in the press box that if LSU were to score, that Brian Kelly would go for 2?
No, not really. I think, and then after the game, Kelly was like, it was kind of an in the moment decision, because he thought the way he thought of it was that if you would have offered me before the game, you had one play to get 3 yards to beat Alabama, he said, I would have taken that 100 times out of 100. And that's the way he kind of rationalized that decision in his head. And to me, I was, talking to people in the press box, I was like, the defense is playing so well. Alabama's not scoring with ease. Alabama is struggling to score on these possessions. There was the pass interference call, all that stuff, the deflection that wasn't called. I thought, take the extra point. I think your defense is playing well enough, but he wanted to go win that game. And I knew they had a call that they had liked. I'd seen them run that play before with Mason Taylor, where he kind of gets across and, they kind of clear it out for him. But they had a play they liked and they went with it. So a huge call. And, ultimately it pays off.
I've covered Brian Kelly for quite a while, off and on, from a distance and in person. I've watched him run that play. He ran it at Notre Dame all the time. It is a great play. It's a tough play for a defender to get in front and get across the face, especially a big guy like Taylor. So that was really well played there. And it's interesting, you and I might have been in the same press box there in New Orleans. I covered the Florida State LSU game at the start of the year. And I really think if Brian Kelly had gone for 2 there, Florida State was reeling defensively, they might have won that game.
Yeah, I thought they should have gone for 2 on that game more than this Alabama game. That the Florida State one, in the moment, I'm like, go for 2, because to me, with the way that game was going, I thought they should have gone for 2. But it all evens out in the course of a season. You beat Alabama on a 2-point conversion, you get an extra point blocked in the game. So they're sitting here with 2 losses, but they control their own destiny going into the final 3 games of the season.
Talk about Jaden Daniels. He's a different guy, and he gets better every week. I thought he was very good in this football game. 22 of 32, 182 yards, 2 touchdowns. More importantly, though, he made big plays when they had to have big plays. He rushed for 95 yards. I think that's on 18 carries. He was simply tremendous, and he continues to grow in confidence. It's just self-evident when you watch them play that there's a guy that believes in himself in a way that maybe he didn't earlier in the season.
Yeah, I love the way that he approached this game, the composure he had. The biggest thing to me was that when Bryce Young had his, quote unquote Heisman moment, when he escaped the pocket and found Ja'Cory Brooks for the touchdown late in the game, Jaden Daniels came back on the field, drove them down for the score, and then in overtime makes the rushing touchdown and then gets the 2-point conversion. He had moment after moment where he delivered on big plays, big throws, throw to Mason Taylor for the touchdown to give them the lead at, I believe it was 24-21. I mean, there was just never a moment when Jaden Daniels wasn't in control of that offense. And that's really all you want from your quarterback, right? You want them to be in control. You want them to be on the same page as everybody. I thought just the passing game was really, really impressive against these Alabama defensive backs. Kayshon Boutte, Malik Neighbors were always on the same page as Jaden Daniels, coming out of their routes sharp. And they, to an extent, attacked Kool-Aid McKinstry and Eli Ricks on the border, so on the outside. So, Jaden Daniels, man, there's not enough words to say about him. But he is a baller. He is one of the. With going toe to toe with Bryce Young here, we know how well quarterbacks have to play to beat Alabama, and I questioned if the Alabama pass rush would bother him. I questioned if he'd be able to make a couple of these throws, but he completely delivered and continues to get better with every week.
And Emory, Williams, as both those guys had great days on the ground. When you look at the yards per carry numbers, I know you guys wrote about that as well on the Bengal Tiger. It's impressive, really, when you think what they pieced together there against Alabama's defense. So that allowed Jaden Daniels to be special as well, because it didn't have to all be on him. Really, everybody rose to the occasion. And I think some of the things that we're talking about here speaks to another maybe surprise for some people if you watched LSU early in the season compared to now, and that is how well this offensive line played in this football game.
Yeah, it's I think it was mentioned on the broadcast because I got home and I actually started watching the broadcast as I was eating. So I rewatched the game at 2 or whatever a.m. it was. And they mentioned it, but you have two true freshman tackles there in Emory Jones and Will Campbell, which was to me a big, big concern going against Will Anderson and Dallas Turner. Just on paper, that makes complete sense. But I thought Mike Denbrock and Brian Kelly did a terrific job of continuing to change up their fronts to slide, to fan, I believe they called it. They kept Josh Williams into block at times. Jaden Daniels they rolled him out a couple times. They had those RPOs where he kind of has a receiver out there where he can throw to, even though Alabama did a good job against that. They did enough to keep Anderson and Turner from just, straight pinning their ears back and attacking. And that is huge. And that's a credit to, the offensive line coach, Brad Davis, Mike Denbrock, Brian Kelly, for figuring out how to minimize the, ability of Anderson and Turner, because those guys coming into the game, I thought were going to have a bigger impact than what they did. And that's not, they didn't change personnel. They still are without, Garrett Dellinger, who's one of their better offensive linemen. So they just, schemed it up really, really well.
And they gave us a magical night, a memorable night. For anybody that's ever been to a game there in Baton Rouge, you got to know how special it is. It almost jumps off the TV as well. What's next for this week of coverage there at the Bengal Tiger? Tell us about what you guys are going to be providing the On3 folks that obviously want to subscribe to the Bengal Tiger.
Yeah, the first thing is recruiting. Obviously, recruiting is the lifeblood of every program, and there's not a site that covers LSU recruiting better than the Bengal Tiger. Shay Dixon, Billy Embody are two of the best in the business. So, yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, LSU got to commit right after the game, and it will continue to heat up with 5-star, 4-stars, a bunch of top players. So, find out who LSU is getting next on the site, at the board, and then figuring out how LSU doesn't have a letdown, going to Arkansas next week. And even though Arkansas, lose out to Liberty, that's going to be a game where you can't take your foot off the gas. I said it last night, this team doesn't have the talent of, Georgia, or even I think, to Tennessee to a degree, to where you just roll the ball out and you go win, you go beat Arkansas 40-10. This team can't roll the ball out and do that. This team has to execute and play at a high level to take advantage of its talent. So yeah, it's going to be a week previewing that, and then basketball starts up tomorrow. So it's all coming together. It's all coming together on the site.
Hard to believe that's all happening right now, as well as we're all entrenched in football. Enjoy every game. I know you enjoy covering it, and you do a great job for us, Matthew. Thank you. Take care. Have a wonderful Sunday. I'll talk to you again down the line.
Yep. Appreciate it, Jeff.
Yep. Take care. Tiger is, of course, the website there for On3. I want to thank all three of my guests. Palmer Toms of Dogs HQ. Go there for the best in Georgia coverage. Tyler Horka, Blue and Gold, has joined us again as Notre Dame. If you think about Notre Dame, if they hadn't lost that game against Stanford, really we'd be talking about where they sit in the top 15. But they did lose that game. They bounced back nicely. They get a big win over Clemson. And then finally there, we thank Matthew Brune once again of the Bengal Tiger for joining us. And then lastly, I want to thank all of you guys. We do it every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. We go ahead and peruse the top 25 in the sport that we're all so passionate about, kind of reflect, reminisce, look ahead. I do know this, the season goes by way too fast. So let's enjoy it while we can together each and every Sunday. We'll talk about these games. We'll look ahead. Matthew, great job producing as always, good sir. And to all of you, I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll talk to you again next week. Enjoy the football until next time. Take care, everybody.